Hey guys! Welcome to another episode of Bible Q&A. Today we're discussing, why was God lenient with David but not with Moses? God's treatment of David and Moses seems very unfair at first glance. David murdered someone in order to get away with his affair with Bathsheba, and he got to remain king after a brief civil war. Meanwhile, Moses angrily struck a rock with a stick and he was banned from entering the Promised Land, the lifelong dream of every Israelite at the time, let alone their leader. How in the world can these actions be justified? Well, let's first look at David. As we discussed in our video on Bathsheba, God, who can see the hearts of people before they're born, according to Jeremiah chapter 1 verse 5, wanted Solomon to eventually rule Israel. Solomon was a pacifistic, skilled negotiator who could bring peace to Israel and thus create a stable environment for the building of the temple, as he noted to Hiram in 1 Kings chapter 5 verses 3 to 4. Getting rid of David, and therefore Solomon as well, would have thus delayed the establishment of this important spiritual edifice. Plus, David's actions had no effect on the people of Israel. This will be important later when we discuss Moses. God told him that his actions allowed his enemies to blaspheme against him, according to 2 Samuel chapter 12 verse 14, but ultimately, the Hebrews did not abandon Jehovah when David abandoned his throne. Thus, the Bathsheba affair remained a personal matter, which God dealt with in a personal fashion, with the uprooting of his family the way David uprooted the family of Uriah. Now, let's head over to Moses. When the Israelites asked for water in Numbers chapter 20 verses 1 to 12, and God told him to strike a rock with a rod in order to create a waterfall, Moses said in verse 10, "Hear now, ye rebels, must we fetch you water out of this rock?" What was the problem with what he did? Well, a minor problem was the anger. As that famous verse from Romans says, "Dearly beloved, avenge not yourselves, but rather give place unto wrath. For it is written, Vengeance is mine, I will repay, saith the Lord." Romans chapter 12 verse 19. Moses had no reason to get so mad, especially for something that insignificant. His outburst prevented him from serving as a mediator between God and the Israelites when either party got mad, as he did in Exodus chapter 32 verses 9 to 14. Jehovah angrily declared his intention to restart Israel through the line of Moses, but Moses convinced him to halt his plans, saying that the Egyptians would laugh at him and Israel as a result. Here, when the Hebrews were mad, Moses should have spoken on behalf of God, encouraging the Israelites to be patient, but he didn't, throwing away an opportunity to bring them closer to Jehovah. However, the biggest problem with this incident was the fact that Moses didn't sanctify God. Essentially, he didn't directly mention that God was the one who brought water from the rock. Obviously, he knew that Jehovah was the one who allowed the magic to work, but the problem wasn't what he thought, it was what the Israelites would think. At several points in their history, when a leader told them that someone other than God could save them from danger, the Israelites easily believed them. In 1 Kings chapter 12 verse 28, King Jeroboam told the people of Israel that the calves he set up in Bethel and Dan were the gods that brought them out of Egypt. In 2 Kings chapter 18 verse 4, the Hebrews worshipped the brazen serpent for saving them from the plague in Numbers chapter 21 verses 4 to 9, before Hezekiah ended the practice. In Jeremiah chapter 44 verses 17 to 19, the Israelites started worshipping the Queen of Heaven, believing that she had stopped all the famines and wars that had previously occurred. Gideon didn't even intend to create an object the Hebrews would worship in Judges chapter 8 verse 27, and yet they worshipped it anyway. With this in mind, God thought that the Israelites could take Moses' statement at face value and thus start to believe that Moses himself brought them out of Egypt. In fact, they already did believe that, in part. In Exodus chapter 32 verse 4, Aaron declared that the golden calf he made was the item that brought Israel out of Egypt, and everyone started worshipping it. However, in verse 1 they said, "Up, make us gods, which shall go before us. For as for this Moses, the man that brought us up out of the land of Egypt, we wot not what is become of him." Exodus chapter 32 verse 1. In their eyes, the golden calf wasn't replacing Jehovah. It was replacing Moses, who was a supernatural being as far as they knew. To solve this problem, God needed somebody different to lead Israel into the Promised Land. Moses simply hadn't done enough to convince the Hebrews that God was the one behind the miracles and not him. God takes this issue so seriously that he had no choice but to terminate his mandate. That's why the psalmist said, "Give unto the Lord the glory due unto his name. Bring an offering, and come into his courts." Psalms chapter 96, verse 8. It was one thing for David to replace Uriah as Bathsheba's husband, but it was another thing for Moses, intentionally or not, to replace him as Israel's leader. Now, we can compare the sin of Moses and the sin of David until the cows come home, but we must make sure that we ourselves aren't making the same mistakes they are. For example, we should be worrying more about our sanctification of God than the sanctification of God by other people. As it was said in 1 Peter, "But sanctify the Lord God in your hearts, and be ready always to give an answer to every man that asketh you a reason of the hope that is in you with meekness and fear." 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 15. And that is where I'm going to stop with this Bible Q&A. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe.